The air inside the small school nurse's room felt heavy, like every breath carried a weight too strong to release. A faint smell of antiseptic lingered, and somewhere in the distance children laughed on the playground, unaware that someone's world was about to break open in silence. Caden Harrington stood frozen near the doorway. Powerful boardrooms, roaring conferences, multi-million signatures. He had stood confidently through all of them. But right now, he could barely stand at all. His chest tightened. His fingers trembled. His mind fell into absolute stillness. On the small cot lay a little girl, tiny hands resting gently, eyelashes still damp from tears she had shed before exhaustion pulled her under. Her breathing had steadied. Her pulse was fine. Her skin, though pale, held warmth. Life was in her. Strength was in her. Light was in her. The nurse placed a reassuring hand on Ariella's shoulder and offered a warm, gentle smile. "She'll be okay," she said softly. "She just needs rest. Your daughter is strong." The world stopped moving. Those 3 words did not fall. They crashed. Your daughter. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet enough to whisper directly into Caden's heart. For a split second, he thought he misheard. His eyes lifted slowly, unknowingly pleading for clarity. His head turned toward the woman standing just a few feet away, Ariella Monroe. The woman he once loved. The woman he lost. The woman he never stopped thinking about. Even when he pretended otherwise, his gaze fell from her face to the child. Her nose, her gentle brow, that familiar warmth in her sleeping expression. Something inside him shattered. His throat tightened so hard it hurt. His heartbeat was no longer steady. It crashed against his chest like waves in a storm. He wanted to speak, but words refused to come. He wanted to move closer, but his feet refused to obey. Suddenly, every sound faded. He couldn't hear the chatter outside. He couldn't hear the rustle of papers. He couldn't even hear the nurse anymore. All he could hear was the echo of that statement, repeating silently in his mind. Your daughter is strong. Your daughter. A child. Her child. Their child. In that moment, something fiery surged through his veins. Shock, confusion, pain, disbelief, hope, fear, and a sorrow so deep it almost buckled his knees. For 10 years he'd lived with an emptiness he never truly understood. Now standing in that room, staring at that little girl, he knew. This was the emptiness. This was the missing heartbeat in his life. He wasn't just looking at a child. He was looking at a life he should have known, a laugh he should have heard, birthdays he should have celebrated, first words he should have witnessed, first steps he should have supported, memories that never happened, moments that were stolen by time, years swallowed in silence. His lips parted slightly. His voice shook when he finally whispered, barely audible, "Your daughter." The room didn't explode. No one screamed. No drama unfolded. Just silence. And truth, hanging in the air like a blade suspended by a thread. Ariella's eyes glistened. Her breath trembled. There was no more hiding left. The past had returned. Truth stood between them. Destiny had arrived. And Caden Harrington, the man who controlled empires, suddenly realized he had never truly been in control of anything that mattered. There are moments in life that don't simply hurt. They echo. They echo through memories, through quiet nights, through years where a heart pretends to move forward but never truly heals. That's what regret does. It stays. It lingers, not loudly, but deeply. For years, Caden carried a weight he never spoke about. People saw a powerful man, always composed, always achieving, always on top of the world. But success has a strange way of masking pain. When the lights faded and the applause died, when he was left alone with nothing but silence and his own breathing, another reality always crept in. He remembered promises he once made. He remembered a love he should have protected. He remembered walking away when he should have held on. That mistake never loosened its grip on his spirit. No matter how much he built, no matter how far he went, regret followed him like an unwelcome shadow. He had moved through celebrations. He had accepted awards. He had given speeches that people praised. Yet every victory felt incomplete. Every accomplishment came with a hollow reminder that something meaningful had slipped out of his life. He didn't lose status. He didn't lose power. He lost a future he didn't even realize he'd been missing. While he tried to drown the emptiness with work, Ariella lived on the other side of that silence, carrying a completely different burden, one he never knew existed. She didn't live with regret in the same way. Hers wasn't about a bad decision she wished she could take back. Hers was about survival, strength, and a promise she silently made to protect. The child growing inside her. Her life was not lined with luxury. It was filled with responsibility. It was filled with moments where she had to be strong even when she felt weak. It was filled with nights when she sat quietly, watching her child sleep, knowing there was a story she hadn't told. Both of them were living with loss, just in different forms. He lost the chance to be a father without knowing he had something to lose. She carried the truth alone, bearing the emotional weight of raising a child with love, while also living with the knowledge that one person who should have known didn't. Years passed, birthdays passed, milestones passed. First laughter, first day of school, little achievements that deserved to be celebrated by two parents instead of one, all locked away in a life he had no idea belonged to him. Caden didn't know he had missed these moments, but the emptiness in him was proof that the absence was real. Sometimes the deepest pain isn't what we lose knowingly. Sometimes it's the life that slips away quietly, leaving behind a loneliness we can't even explain. Ariella, on the other hand, knew every detail of that lost connection. Every time her daughter asked about a father, every time she saw familiar traits in her child that reminded her of the man she once loved, she felt the weight of the truth, not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but out of responsibility. She chose silence not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much about peace. Hidden truths don't simply disappear. They sit quietly. They wait. They anchor themselves in hearts, waiting for the day they can no longer remain buried. That is what destiny did here. It allowed years to stretch. It allowed wounds to deepen. It allowed both hearts to grow, until they were ready to face what had been buried for too long. But now, standing in that school nurse's room, the past was no longer distant. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't something that could be ignored. It had a face. It had a heartbeat. It had a name. It breathed. It smiled. It existed. Regret wasn't just an emotion anymore. Lost time wasn't just a sorrowful thought. Hidden truth wasn't simply a secret. They had all formed into a living child sleeping on that small bed. A child who deserved more than mistakes, assumptions, and fear. A child who unknowingly carried the connection between two adults who once loved deeply but were separated by pride, pressure, and pain. This wasn't just about what happened in the past. This was about everything that had been stolen from the future. And standing in that room, one truth became painfully clear. When life withholds truth, it doesn't erase destiny. It only delays it. But delays always come with a price, and both hearts were finally about to face it. When truth finally stood in that quiet room, one question silently pressed against the heart harder than anything else. Why was this child kept secret from him? It wasn't a casual mistake. It wasn't something small. This wasn't information someone just forgot to share. This was life. This was blood. This was identity. This was a bond that should have existed from the beginning. What could push a woman to protect a child by keeping her father absent? What could drive someone who once loved deeply to choose silence for an entire decade? Most people would jump to judgment. Some would say she was selfish. Some would say she wanted control. Others would argue she robbed him of fatherhood. But life is never that simple. Pain rarely creates choices anyone wants to make. Instead, it forces decisions people have to live with. Ariella wasn't heartless. She wasn't careless. She wasn't someone who moved on and erased him. She remembered everything. She remembered the moment love felt safe. She remembered when trust was warm. She remembered how deeply she believed in him. But she also remembered the day that belief collapsed. She remembered standing there while accusations surrounded her like weapons that had no mercy. She remembered the pressure from his world, the cold eyes watching her, the way people treated her like a stain that didn't deserve to be near him. She remembered waiting for him to choose her, and watching him hesitate. That hesitation cut deeper than any insult. It wasn't that he hated her. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that he didn't stand where love should have stood strong. So when she discovered she was carrying a child, she asked herself questions no woman should ever have to face alone. Would her child be loved genuinely, or examined like a scandal? Would she live freely, or exist under constant public judgment? Would she be seen as a blessing, or as controversy in a wealthy man's world? Would Ariella forever have to defend her child from whispers and headlines, rather than letting her simply grow in peace? Caden, on the other hand, had a question of his own that stabbed him deeply. Why wasn't I trusted with the truth? He wasn't perfect. He failed her once. He didn't stand when she needed him. But could one moment of weakness justify losing an entire decade of fatherhood? He didn't know about the sleepless nights Ariella spent alone. He didn't know the weight of every doctor visit she handled by herself. He didn't know about the scraped knees, the school projects, the emotional milestones, the quiet celebrations, and the endless sacrifices that motherhood demanded. He didn't know, because he was never told. So now there was a painful clash of emotions. A mother who believed she was protecting her child. A father who never got the chance to protect his own blood. Two hearts wounded in different ways. Two minds trying to understand decisions shaped by fear, pressure, heartbreak, and survival. This story wasn't simply about a secret child. It was about trust shattered by doubt. It was about choices made when hearts were wounded. It was about a man who lost more than he understood. It was about a woman who carried responsibility alone because she didn't trust the world that once broke her. And far above all, it was about a child who never asked for any of it, yet lived at the center of it all. So the real questions reach deeper than curiosity. If you were Ariella, would you have risked exposing your child to a powerful world that once threw you aside? If you were Caden, could you bear knowing years of fatherhood were taken away from you? Who was right? Who was wrong? Or was this never about right and wrong, but about hearts trying to survive in the only way they knew how? One thing was certain. Silence had written 10 years' worth of destiny. Now truth had arrived. And truth always demands that wounds be faced, tears be acknowledged, and choices be revisited. Because when a hidden past rises, it doesn't just open a story. It forces everyone connected to it to confront who they were, who they became, and who they must now choose to be. Stories like this aren't just about events. They are about hearts standing on the edge of change. When truth finally breaks through silence, it doesn't knock politely. It comes with impact. It forces people to confront everything they once buried, everything they once feared, everything they never thought they'd face again. Standing in that school nurse's room was not just a reunion. It was a turning point that would shape every heartbeat moving forward. This wasn't only about a child discovering the man who shared her blood. It wasn't only about a woman confronting the past she walked away from. It wasn't only about a man realizing life had withheld something priceless from him. It was about destiny stepping in with perfect timing, saying, "Now you must face the truth you once ran from." Ahead of them lay a storm of emotions. Tears that had been held back for years were going to finally fall. Words that should have been spoken long ago were finally going to be voiced. Pain that had been locked deep inside was going to surface whether they were prepared or not. Caden would have to confront the ache of lost fatherhood, not in anger, but in raw sorrow. He would face the emotional weight of knowing he missed the first 10 years of his child's life, the laughter he never heard, the questions he never answered, the tiny hands he never helped guide. That realization wasn't going to simply sting. It was going to break him, reshape him, and force him to understand just how deeply a hidden truth can change the course of someone's life. Ariella, too, would have to face accountability, not as punishment, but as emotional honesty. She would have to explain the fear that guided her choices. She would have to stand firm on why she believed distance was safer, yet also admit the pain of carrying everything alone. She would have to watch him break and accept that part of his pain existed because of her silence. But pain would not be the only thing waiting ahead. There was also something powerful rising with that truth. Growth, understanding, healing. Because sometimes what life separates, maturity can rebuild. Sometimes the same hearts that were hurt in the past are not the same hearts standing in the present. Time changes people. Experiences soften pride. Lessons shape character. The road before them would not be smooth. There would be tension. There would be conversations filled with emotion. There would be moments where both would have to choose humility over ego. But there would also be quiet moments of reconnecting. Moments where forgiveness begins to feel possible. Moments where love does not feel like a mistake, but a second chance. And right in the center of everything is a child who never asked for any of this, yet holds the power to change both their hearts without even trying. Her laughter, her innocence, her warmth, her presence alone will challenge them to become better than their pain. So here is the journey ahead. You will see truth confront fear. You will see regret meet opportunity. You will see pride fall aside for something greater. You will see a man rediscover what it truly means to care. You will see a woman learn that guarding alone is not the only form of protection. You will see a child become the bridge that reconnects two separated worlds. This is not just a story of shock and revelation. It is a story of responsibility, courage, second chances, and deep emotional rebuilding. And before this story reaches its final moment, hearts will be shattered, only so they can be rebuilt stronger than before. So stay with this story. Stay for the truth. Stay for the pain. Stay for the healing. Stay for the reminder that life always has a way of bringing forward what is meant to be faced, no matter how long it takes. Because what destiny delayed, it has now returned, and everything is about to change. Before we journey deeper into this powerful story, I want to speak directly to you watching right now. Because this isn't just entertainment. This is about choices, emotions, responsibility, and the fragile way life can shift in a single moment. You've just witnessed the beginning of something life-changing, a truth finally stepping into the light after 10 long years. And trust me, what lies ahead is even more intense, more emotional, and far more meaningful than anything you've seen so far. There are moments coming that will test loyalty, reveal true character, challenge forgiveness, and prove whether love can still stand after being shattered. So if you're already feeling the weight of this story, if your heart reacted to that emotional shock in the nurse's room, if you're curious to see whether this broken connection can become whole again, stay with this story until the very end. Make sure you like this video so more people can discover it. Share it with someone who understands deep emotional stories. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know, do you believe Ariella was right to keep the child away for peace and protection? Or do you feel Caden deserved to know from the beginning, no matter how complicated his world was? Your opinion matters, and your perspective adds life to this conversation. And if you are new here or haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This way, you won't miss any of these powerful storytelling experiences. Every single episode is crafted to pull you into a journey of emotions, lessons, and unforgettable moments. Because what's coming next will challenge your heart even deeper. We're about to travel back in time. We're going to witness how love began, how it grew, how it collapsed, and how life set destiny in motion long before anyone realized it. So don't leave. Don't miss what follows. Now, let's go back to where it all started. Ridgecrest Heights was not just a city, it was a statement. It stood proudly beneath a clear blue sky, where towering glass buildings touched the clouds like monuments built for ambition. Streets were lined with sleek black cars that hummed quietly, guided by drivers wearing immaculate suits. Rooftops sparkled with lighting installations, penthouse pools reflected sunlight like liquid diamonds, and the air always seemed to carry the scent of money and power. Every morning, the city awakened in elegance. Cafes served coffee worth more than some people's weekly wages, and designer stores opened their doors to those who lived without financial limits. Conversations here weren't whispered dreams, they were negotiations, plans, and future empires forming in real time. Ridgecrest Heights moved with confidence. People carried themselves like success was stitched into their names. Yet beneath the glamour and constant rhythm of prosperity, there was pressure everywhere. This city was built for winners, but it demanded something in return. Ambition was celebrated, but vulnerability rarely survived within its borders. Smiles were often polite rather than genuine. Friendships were strategic more than emotional. Luxury came with expectations, and comfort existed side by side with constant competition. At night, Ridgecrest Heights sparkled even brighter. Tower lights painted the skyline in shades of gold and blue. Music drifted from penthouses hosting exclusive gatherings. Helicopters occasionally swept across the horizon, and distant laughter echoed over the rooftops. It was stunning to look at, breathtaking to experience, and unforgettable to anyone who ever set foot there. But like many beautiful places where power thrives, Ridgecrest Heights also carried silent stories. Stories hidden beneath glowing windows and immaculate lifestyles. Stories of people who had everything, yet quietly felt something missing. And at the very center of this brilliant city stood a man whose name carried more influence than most buildings combined. A man the world admired. A man people envied. A man no one truly understood. At the core of Ridgecrest Heights' influence stood one name spoken with admiration, envy, and absolute recognition: Caden Harrington. He wasn't simply wealthy. He was a force whose presence commanded attention the moment he entered any room. As the head of Harrington Technologies, his leadership shaped industries, guided markets, and influenced decisions far beyond city limits. When he spoke in boardrooms, silence followed. When he made a decision, corporations shifted direction. When he endorsed innovation, the world paid attention. Caden carried himself with quiet authority. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and always composed. His suits were tailored perfectly, not in a showy way, but in a manner that reflected precision and discipline. His expression often remained steady, a calm confidence in his eyes that told everyone he was a man who didn't just reach success, he built it, controlled it, and protected it. He didn't chase attention, yet attention always found him. News outlets loved to discuss his achievements. Business magazines placed him on their covers. Young entrepreneurs studied him like a role model. Older executives respected him because he never relied on luck. He relied on relentless work, sharp intuition, and unshakable determination. He was invited to elite events, private gatherings, and powerful discussions where only those with true influence were allowed. To his employees, he was demanding but fair. To his partners, he was strategic and dependable. To the public, he was an icon of success and stability. People admired the way he controlled situations effortlessly, never appearing nervous, never seeming unsure. The world saw a man who had mastered life. A man who had everything: power, status, reputation, wealth, and respect wrapped naturally around his existence. He looked like someone who should have been satisfied. Someone who had reached the highest level a person could possibly rise to. But life is rarely that simple. Success does not always guarantee fulfillment. And even a man who owned empires could still feel a quiet ache no one else could see. To the world, Caden Harrington looked untouchable. Whenever he stepped out of his sleek black car, cameras eagerly captured every movement. Employees straightened up the moment they heard his footsteps. Business leaders spoke his name with admiration, often calling him the benchmark of excellence. He could stand on a stage before thousands, speaking with power and clarity, and not a single person would doubt his certainty or strength. In public, Caden appeared unshakable, always confident, always composed, always ahead. People saw a leader who never stumbled. They saw a figure who seemed to glide through life effortlessly. He smiled when required, gave firm handshakes, offered inspiring speeches, and made decisions others only dreamed of having the authority to make. Every achievement added to the legend surrounding him, building the image of a man who had mastered success and turned it into a lifestyle. But away from the flashing lights and respectful applause, a different truth lived quietly. When doors closed and crowds disappeared, The weight he carried truly settled. His penthouse, though luxurious and breathtaking, often felt too quiet. The silence inside wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Nights stretched longer than they should, and mornings sometimes began with a tiredness that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from emotional fatigue. He rarely laughed genuinely anymore. Conversations felt transactional. Connections came without depth. People approached him for opportunity, alliances, and benefits, rarely for sincerity. He was surrounded by admiration, yet starved of real warmth. He had everything society measured value by, and yet his life often felt strangely hollow. There were moments he stood by the massive windows of his home, city lights glowing beneath him, and wondered why victory never felt complete. Why, with so much achieved, his heart still felt unfinished. In public, he was a symbol of absolute control. In private, he was a man quietly fighting a loneliness no one could see. There were nights when Caden sat alone in his living room, city lights pouring through the tall windows, yet none of that glow ever reached his heart. The silence became a mirror that reflected everything he couldn't admit out loud. Success couldn't distract him forever. Power couldn't silence the ache completely. Respect from the world couldn't comfort a heart that quietly longed for something deeper than applause. He often found himself replaying moments from years ago. Moments he wished he had handled differently, words he regretted saying, decisions he wished he had made with courage rather than pressure. He never spoke about it to anyone. There was no one he trusted enough to truly understand. So regret became his quiet companion, sitting with him in the darkness when no one else was there. Some nights he woke before dawn, not from nightmares, but from a feeling he couldn't shake, a sense that something meaningful had slipped away from his life and never returned. He would stand by the glass walls of his penthouse, hands tucked into his pockets, staring at the city below with tired eyes. To everyone else, his world seemed complete. To him, it felt unfinished. He didn't miss wealth. He didn't miss opportunity. What haunted him was something far more human: the loss of connection, the loss of warmth, the loss of a future he once glimpsed but failed to hold on to. He tried to bury himself in work, hoping responsibilities would drown the quiet ache inside him. But no meeting, no contract, no achievement ever filled that silent space in his chest. It wasn't loneliness created by isolation. It was the emptiness that comes from knowing life once offered something precious, and it slipped away. Deep inside, something whispered that he had lost more than he understood. Something irreplaceable. Something life would eventually bring back to confront him. Something that waited, patient, unseen, but destined to change everything when it finally returned. Ariella Monroe was the kind of woman people remembered without fully understanding why. She didn't command attention with loudness or extravagance. Instead, her presence carried a quiet strength that drew respect naturally. Her beauty wasn't about perfection, it was about warmth, confidence, and the calm assurance in her eyes. She walked through life with composure, as if she had already faced storms and learned how to stand firm through every gust of wind. Her voice was gentle when she spoke, yet there was conviction beneath it. She wasn't the type to start conflict, but she would never back down when something mattered. There was depth in her gaze, a softness surrounded by experiences that shaped her heart instead of hardening it. People who met her often sensed a story behind her calm exterior, something she didn't flaunt, something she rarely shared, but something that gave her presence weight. She carried herself with dignity everywhere she went, not because life treated her kindly, but because she refused to let hardships strip away her grace. Ariella Monroe was strength quietly wrapped in calmness, a woman whose spirit learned to stand tall long before the world realized how powerful she truly was. Ariella didn't live surrounded by luxury or excess. Her world was quieter, steadier, built from effort rather than privilege. Her home wasn't extravagant, but it was warm. Every corner reflected care: neatly arranged shelves, soft lighting, framed moments that captured love instead of wealth. There was comfort in the simplicity, a sense of peace created not by riches, but by intention. Her days were busy, yet meaningful. She worked diligently, not because anyone demanded it from her, but because she carried a personal standard of responsibility. She managed her time, balanced responsibilities, and made sure those she cared for always felt supported. Life didn't hand her ease, but she handled challenges with calm steadiness, never allowing struggle to turn into chaos. People who knew her admired the way she never complained unnecessarily. She rarely spoke about what she lacked. Instead, she appreciated what she had. There was pride in how she lived, not arrogant pride, but grateful pride. She proved every day that fulfillment didn't require grand mansions or diamond-filled wardrobes. It required peace, self-respect, and love in the right places. Her life was simple, yes, but there was nothing small about it. It was intentional, meaningful, and beautifully grounded. What made Ariella truly remarkable was the balance within her. She carried resilience in a way that didn't feel hardened or harsh. Strength lived in her posture, in the decisions she made, in the way she faced life without running from it. Yet kindness never left her voice. Compassion never left her expressions. She could be firm without being cold, gentle without being weak. Life had tested her more than once, yet she never allowed bitterness to shape her character. Instead of growing distant, she grew wise. Instead of becoming guarded beyond reach, she learned how to protect her peace while still opening her heart to those who deserved it. There was elegance in the way she handled challenges, choosing calm understanding over chaos, choosing patience over anger, choosing dignity over dramatic reactions. People admired her because she didn't need to shout to prove strength. She didn't need to tear others down to feel valued. Her grace came from self-awareness, from knowing who she was and refusing to let circumstances redefine her worth. She could comfort with a smile. She could steady someone with a quiet word. She could hold herself together, even when life tried to pull her apart. Ariella was powerful, just not in the way the world usually measures power. Ariella's strength didn't appear overnight. It was shaped by experiences that demanded resilience long before anyone realized how much weight she carried. She had faced disappointment, faced judgment, faced moments where the world felt unfair and unkind, yet she refused to allow those moments to define her spirit. Instead of breaking, she learned. Instead of collapsing, she grew steadier. Every difficult season taught her patience, responsibility, and courage. There were times life demanded decisions she never planned to make. Times where she had to stand alone, trust her instincts and create stability with nothing but determination and faith in her heart. Those years built maturity in her, not the kind that makes someone distant, but the kind that deepens their understanding of life and their empathy toward others. Her heart did not close, it became wiser. Her mind did not harden, it became clearer. She learned how to feel deeply without losing control, how to care without losing herself, and how to move forward even when the past tried to hold her back. By the time destiny led her toward the moment that would change everything, Ariella was no longer just a woman who survived hardship. She was a woman emotionally strong enough to face truth, no matter how heavy it might be. Years earlier, before truths were hidden, and before hearts learned the hard lessons they would carry, their story began quietly on a day that seemed ordinary. It was a corporate event filled with polished shoes, business laughter, expensive perfumes, and conversations fueled by ambition. Staff moved swiftly to ensure everything appeared flawless. Among them was Ariella, focused and determined, carrying a stack of neatly arranged folders pressed carefully against her chest. She moved quickly through the hallway when her heel caught slightly against the polished floor. The folders slipped. Papers scattered everywhere, sliding across the reflective tiles like fluttering leaves caught in wind. A few people glanced over, then looked away. They had conversations to maintain, egos to protect, faces to uphold. No one bent down, except one man. A hand reached forward without hesitation. Caden Harrington, powerful, respected, untouchable in reputation, was kneeling on the floor, helping her gather every single sheet. No assistant, no hesitation, no irritation, just quiet concern. "It's okay," he said gently, his voice steady and warm. "Take your time, no rush." Ariella's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but his calm presence softened the moment. Instead of feeling judged, she felt seen. Instead of feeling small, she felt respected. Their eyes met briefly, not in a dramatic, cinematic moment, but in a simple human connection. He didn't rush away when they finished. He handed the stack back carefully, fingers brushing slightly against hers, and smiled. Everything's safe now. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't thunder, chaos, or dramatic intensity. It was simply kindness meeting appreciation. And without realizing it, that quiet kindness opened the first door to something neither of them expected life to build. Their connection didn't rush forward like something desperate to prove itself. It grew gently, almost shyly, the way early morning light slowly brightens a room. After that first encounter, their paths crossed again throughout the event. Sometimes it was a brief glance, sometimes a short conversation, nothing dramatic, yet nothing ordinary either. Caden found reasons to remain nearby longer than he normally would, not because he needed to be there, but because being near her felt unexpectedly comfortable. Ariella, still professional and composed, didn't chase his attention. She wasn't trying to impress him, and that alone intrigued him. She spoke with courtesy, carried herself with confidence, and when she smiled, it wasn't for approval. It was simply real. Conversations between them began lightly. Polite thank yous, brief exchanges about work, harmless humor shared quietly, while others remained caught up in their important displays of status. There was no tension, no ego, just familiarity beginning to bloom. Over time, moments subtly stretched. Instead of simple greetings, they shared thoughtful discussions. Instead of quick goodbyes, they lingered. They didn't rush toward love. They allowed it to develop like something valuable, naturally, patiently, without pressure. Caden didn't treat her like another face in his world. He listened. He laughed softly at things she mentioned. He noticed details most people ignored, the sincerity in her voice, the way she thought before speaking, the honesty in her expressions. Their connection was not loud. It was steady, not overwhelming, but undeniably real, not explosive, but deeply meaningful. Two lives from completely different worlds quietly aligned, not through grand gestures, but through genuine interaction. And slowly, something began growing between them that no one planned, but both felt deeply. With everyone else, Caden Harrington was a symbol, a figure of authority, a name associated with influence. People adjusted themselves around him, measuring their tone, calculating their words, treating him like a monument rather than a man. But with Ariella, that barrier slowly disappeared. He didn't feel the need to impress her. He didn't wear his achievements like armor when they spoke. Around her, titles didn't matter. Instead of Mr. Harrington, he was simply Caden, a man who could breathe, who could relax, who didn't have to constantly maintain the image the world demanded. They would talk, and for the first time in a long while, he felt heard for reasons that had nothing to do with power. She wasn't fascinated by his wealth. She wasn't dazzled by status. She didn't try to gain anything from him. She gently reminded him what it felt like to be valued for his heart, not his reputation. He opened up to her in ways he never planned to. He laughed differently with her, genuinely, freely. Sometimes they'd share light jokes. Sometimes they'd simply sit in comfortable silence, a kind of silence that didn't feel empty but peaceful. She saw the man behind the responsibilities, the soul beneath the leadership, the vulnerability hidden behind controlled smiles. Ariella didn't treat him like someone unattainable. She spoke to him naturally, looked into his eyes without hesitation, and interacted with him like he was human. Because to her, he was, and for Caden, that was rare. She became the one place where he felt grounded, where expectations didn't suffocate him, and where his heart felt acknowledged instead of managed. For the first time in years, he wasn't living as a billionaire. He was simply living as himself. Their bond strengthened through small, meaningful moments rather than dramatic declarations. Some evenings, after long days filled with responsibilities, they would simply walk together beneath the city lights. No grand destinations, no rush, just two people moving side by side, sharing quiet laughter and unguarded thoughts. The world felt calmer in those moments. He wasn't weighed down by expectations, and she wasn't overshadowed by his world. They were just two souls finding comfort in each other's presence. Conversations between them went deeper over time. They spoke about childhood memories, fears they rarely admitted to anyone, dreams they carried silently, and hopes they weren't sure life would ever grant them. Caden would listen with genuine curiosity. Ariella would speak with honesty and warmth. Sometimes they didn't need many words. The comfort between them already said enough. Their affection wasn't loud or reckless. It was thoughtful. A soft touch when reassurance was needed. A warm hug that lingered slightly longer than usual. A gentle forehead kiss that spoke of tenderness instead of possession. It wasn't love built on excitement alone. It was love built on trust, safety, and understanding. With her, he felt steady. With him, she felt cherished. Together, they felt right. Before we continue this journey deeper into their story, I'd love to hear from you watching. Do you think the strongest relationships are the ones built slowly, through trust and shared moments, rather than instant intensity? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters. And if you're enjoying this emotional journey, remember to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this powerful story. The next part will test this love in ways neither of them saw coming. Stay with me. Their peaceful love story didn't collapse because of anything they did to each other. It began to fracture because of a world that fed on speculation and drama. One morning, without warning, Caden's name appeared across multiple headlines, not for a groundbreaking business achievement, but for something deeply personal and cruelly twisted. Articles appeared online. Whispered gossip moved quickly. Anonymous sources claimed Ariella wasn't with him out of love, but out of ambition. Stories suggested she planned to climb using his status. That she saw him as a ladder rather than a man. That she wanted access, attention, and wealth. None of it was true, yet truth rarely spreads as fast as damage. Their photos together were cropped and twisted. Innocent moments were turned into accusations. Comment sections filled with harsh opinions from people who didn't know either of them. Radio shows debated the scandal. Business blogs analyzed whether Caden's personal life would harm his empire. Overnight, Ariella's name moved from softness and warmth into unwanted public discussion. A love story that once belonged only to their hearts suddenly became a topic for strangers to dissect. And without realizing it, a storm had begun. Inside Harrington Technologies, the reaction was immediate. Board members called emergency meetings. Senior executives exchanged tense phone calls. Public relations advisors moved quickly, treating the rumor not as gossip, but as a threat that needed to be contained. To them, image was everything. Stability meant investor confidence. Investor confidence meant uninterrupted power. Anything that looked like vulnerability had to be managed before it grew. They didn't care about love. They cared about reputation. Conversations in polished offices were no longer about innovation or progress. They were about damage control. Calm voices disguised concern as professionalism, while subtle panic hid beneath their carefully chosen words. They discussed Ariella like she was a risk factor rather than a human being. They analyzed how her presence might influence Caden's credibility, how emotional attachment could be seen as weakness, how the company needed to remain secure. They spoke to him not as friends or supporters, but as guardians of a corporate giant who believed emotions were liabilities. Their goal wasn't truth. Their goal was control. Protect the brand, protect the image, protect the empire. And slowly, a love story was being reduced to a calculated problem that demanded a solution, regardless of who got hurt in the process. As rumors continued spreading, pressure from investors intensified. Shareholders demanded reassurance. They didn't ask about Caden's well-being or whether the accusations were true. Their only concern was how this situation might affect profits, partnerships, and public confidence. Phone calls poured in from powerful people who had never once cared about his happiness but suddenly felt entitled to influence his personal life. Standing at the center of this tightening circle was Caden's executive assistant, a woman who had always valued power over emotion. She saw Ariella not as someone meaningful in Caden's life, but as a threat to control. With carefully chosen words and calculated expressions, she began shaping the narrative. She whispered doubts into strategic conversations. She emphasized how dangerous it was for Caden to appear emotionally compromised. She reminded him of past corporate setbacks other leaders faced when personal relationships became public. Little by little, she turned concern into suspicion. She painted Ariella as a distraction. She subtly questioned her intentions, hinting that maybe the media wasn't entirely wrong. And with every word, she pushed Caden further from trust and closer to uncertainty. It wasn't chaos. It was pressure disguised as guidance. And it was working. This was the moment love needed strength. And Caden didn't rise fast enough. He wasn't angry with Ariella. He didn't believe she was what the media painted her to be. Deep down, he knew her heart. He knew her sincerity. He knew the warmth she carried. But when influential voices surrounded him, when every advisor insisted he handle the situation carefully, hesitation crept in. Instead of immediately standing before the world and declaring her worth, he paused. Instead of shutting down the lies with firm conviction, he allowed fear to weigh heavily on his decisions. He worried about the company. He worried about reputation. He worried about consequences that hadn't even happened yet. And in that pause, trust cracked. Ariella didn't need him to be perfect. She needed him to choose her confidently. She needed him to say, "She matters, this is real. I won't abandon her." But what she saw instead was silence where assurance should have been, distance where protection should have stood, uncertainty where love once felt secure. Caden didn't betray her with harsh actions. He betrayed her with hesitation, and sometimes that hurts even more. The day they finally faced each other, the air between them felt heavy with everything left unspoken. Ariella stood before Caden with eyes that once sparkled with warmth, now shadowed by disappointment. She wasn't angry in a loud way. She wasn't dramatic. She was hurt, deeply, silently, painfully. "So this is how easily I become questionable?" she asked softly, her voice steady but trembling beneath the surface. "One rumor, and suddenly strangers have more power over our story than we do?" Caden tried to explain. He spoke about timing. He spoke about needing to be careful. He mentioned the company, the pressure, the consequences being whispered into his ear from every direction. But none of those explanations answered the only thing Ariella needed to hear. "Do you believe me?" she asked. He hesitated, not because he doubted her heart, but because he was caught between love and fear. That pause pierced deeper than any accusation. Tears filled her eyes, not from weakness, but from heartbreak that the man who once made her feel safe now made her feel uncertain. In that moment, it wasn't the world breaking them. It was the silence standing between them. Once emotions reached that fragile edge, words no longer came gently. They came from wounded hearts trying to protect themselves. Caden spoke with tension he didn't intend, voice tightened by pressure rather than anger. He tried to balance reason and emotion, but in doing so, he sounded distant, like someone weighing outcomes instead of fighting for love. Ariella, overwhelmed by hurt, couldn't hold everything inside anymore. She spoke through tears she tried to hide, her voice trembling not from weakness but from betrayal. "I stood by you when you were just a man to me, not an empire. Why is it so hard for you to stand by me now?" Her words cut deeply, not to harm him but because they were true. He responded with defenses shaped by fear. She reacted with honesty shaped by pain. In the struggle to protect themselves, they unintentionally wounded each other more. Neither raised their voice much, yet every sentence carried weight. Every pause carried heartbreak. There are moments when love bleeds not from hatred, but from disappointed expectation. This was one of those moments. And after those painful words left their lips, the silence that followed felt impossible to repair. There wasn't a dramatic, final scene. No shouting through hallways, no grand declarations. Just two hurting hearts standing across from each other, realizing that something once steady had silently cracked beyond repair. The distance between them didn't come from lack of love. It came from trust slipping away, from wounds neither of them knew how to heal in that moment. Ariella took a slow breath, steadying herself. "I can't stay where I'm not fully believed," she whispered. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't meant to guilt him. It was truth, raw, painful and honest. She couldn't fight the world and also fight the man she loved. She needed certainty. She needed protection. She needed him. Caden stood still, struggling between reaching out and staying bound by fear and obligation. He wanted to hold on to her. He wanted to promise everything would be different. But his hesitation had already spoken louder than anything he could try to say now. So silence became their final answer. They were still in love. That never changed. But love without courage couldn't survive the storm surrounding them. And in that heartbreaking moment, what once felt unbreakable finally fell apart. Ariella didn't walk away because she stopped loving him. She walked away because love alone no longer felt safe. With tears quietly streaking down her face, she turned from the man who once made her feel cherished and protected. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if her heart resisted leaving the piece of itself that still belonged to him. She didn't slam doors. She didn't create chaos. She left silently, carrying pain no one else could understand. She carried the memory of every laugh they shared, every late-night conversation, every soft moment that once promised forever. And now, every one of those memories hurt. Outside, the world continued, as if nothing significant had changed. Cars moved, people walked, life flowed. But inside her, everything had shattered. She had believed in love. She had trusted in commitment. But when life demanded proof, she was left standing alone. Behind her, Caden remained frozen, a quiet ache spreading through his chest. He didn't chase her, not because he didn't care, but because hesitation still held him hostage. And so, she disappeared from his life, carrying heartbreak and an unspoken truth neither of them yet knew would one day return. Life has a way of revealing its biggest turns in the quietest moments. Weeks after walking away from the love she once believed would last, Ariella began noticing subtle changes. Fatigue that lingered, unexplained emotions, moments of dizziness she tried to ignore. She assumed it was stress. Heartbreak alone can exhaust the soul, she told herself. But when the symptoms persisted, she stood in front of a small pharmacy counter, hands shaking slightly as she purchased a test she hoped she wouldn't need. At home, she sat silently for a long time before gathering the courage to take it. Minutes felt like hours. Her heart pounded. Her breathing slowed. Then, she looked down. 2 clear lines. Her fingers trembled as tears filled her eyes, not out of shame, not out of regret, but because reality now held an entirely new weight. She placed her hand gently on her stomach, overwhelmed by emotions words couldn't fully capture. There was life growing inside her, a piece of her, a piece of him. In that moment, every memory of Caden flooded back. His laughter, his warmth, his gentleness, the way he once held her like she mattered more than anything. But those memories clashed with pain, with disappointment, with the moment he hesitated when she needed certainty. Ariella sank slowly into a chair, tears quietly escaping as she whispered softly to herself, trying to steady her breathing. She wasn't just heartbroken anymore. She was now responsible for a future that depended entirely on her strength, her choices, her courage, and her life had just changed forever. The realization did not settle gently. At first, it felt like the ground beneath Ariella had shifted. Shock wrapped around her chest, making it hard to breathe. She sat still for a long while, staring at the quiet room as tears continued to fall, not because she didn't want the child, but because she understood what this meant. Everything in her life now carried deeper meaning and heavier responsibility. Fear followed quickly. Questions flooded her mind. How would she provide? Could she do this alone? What kind of future could she give a child when her own heart was still recovering from loss? She feared judgment. She feared loneliness. Most of all, she feared failing a child who deserved stability and love. Nights became restless as she lay awake, hands resting gently on her stomach, listening to the silence while trying to steady her thoughts. But fear didn't stay forever. Slowly, determination rose inside her. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't weak. She wasn't incapable. She had always survived difficult seasons, and this time, she wouldn't just survive. she would protect, nurture, and build a life worthy of the child inside her. Her tears stopped being tears of fear and began to carry resolve. Her breathing steadied. Her heart, though hurt, learned to steady itself with strength. She whispered softly, as if already speaking to the tiny life within her, "You are wanted. You will be safe. I will not fail you." Shock faded. Fear softened. And what remained was a woman choosing courage, even when the path ahead promised challenges she had never faced before. Ariella didn't decide to keep the truth from Caden out of anger or revenge. Her decision came from deep reflection, from memories she couldn't forget, and from a promise she silently made the moment she knew a child depended on her choices. She remembered his world clearly, a place filled with flashing cameras, judgmental headlines, opportunistic people, and powerful figures who valued status above humanity. These were the same individuals who once questioned her worth, who looked at her like she didn't belong beside him. They treated love like a weakness and compassion like a liability. That environment had nearly broken her once. She couldn't risk exposing a child to that same coldness. She wanted peace for her baby, not scrutiny, not constant gossip, not the pressure of living as a headline. She wanted a childhood filled with warmth, laughter, and safety, not one lived under public expectation or corporate interest. A child deserved to grow freely, not under watchful eyes waiting for flaws. And although she once loved Caden deeply, she couldn't ignore that when she needed him most, he hesitated. That hesitation haunted her. If he couldn't protect her when the world attacked, how could she trust that he would shield a child from that same world? She didn't doubt that he could love a child. She doubted the environment around him. She doubted the people who controlled his decisions. She doubted whether love could survive in a place where power constantly overshadowed emotion. So she made the hardest choice a mother can make. She chose distance, not to punish him, but to protect the innocent life she carried. Single motherhood was not romantic. It wasn't poetic. It was real, demanding, and filled with moments that tested Ariella's strength in ways nothing ever had before. From the first flutter of movement in her stomach to sleepless nights after birth, she carried every responsibility alone. Doctor visits, checkups, planning, preparing. Every task rested entirely on her shoulders. There were days when exhaustion settled into her bones. She worked long hours because bills didn't wait. There were times she held her baby in one arm while completing tasks with the other, whispering soft reassurances even when she herself needed comfort. She smiled for her child, even on days when she felt incredibly small inside. Tears came, especially in the quiet of night. She would stand over the crib, watching the tiny life breathing peacefully, and cry silently, not from regret, but from the overwhelming mix of love and fear. She worried about the future. She worried about stability, but she never once doubted her devotion. Money was tight at times. Strength was required daily. Every milestone came with both joy and heaviness, because she celebrated alone. First smiles, first steps, first laughs. She clapped, cheered, kissed her child's cheeks, and afterward, wiped tears no one saw. Still, she refused to break. Whenever she felt like collapsing, she would look at her child and remind herself that quitting wasn't an option. She worked, she stood strong, and she kept moving forward. Not because life made it easy, but because her child deserved a mother who would do whatever it took. What ultimately sustained Ariella wasn't force or stubborn endurance, it was love. Pure, unconditional, unwavering love for the child who became the center of her world. Every morning when her daughter opened her eyes and smiled, it felt like sunlight breaking through every shadow life had ever thrown at her. That little voice calling Mom gave purpose to every sacrifice. Tiny arms wrapping around her neck erased countless worries. Each giggle reminded her that happiness could still bloom in the most unexpected places. Love transformed her exhaustion into motivation. On days when her body felt weak, love strengthened her spirit. When nights grew heavy with uncertainty, the steady breathing of her child beside her reminded her why she kept going. She no longer lived for herself alone. She lived for someone who depended entirely on her strength, guidance, and protection. She learned to celebrate victories no matter how small they seemed. A warm meal prepared, a bill paid, a milestone achieved, a day successfully completed. She learned to find joy in creating a stable, loving home instead of longing for the life she left behind. Her heart grew in capacity, her determination sharpened, her sense of purpose deepened, and through it all, she never poisoned her child's heart. She didn't speak with bitterness. She didn't fill their home with resentment. She chose kindness, compassion, and hope, because she refused to let pain shape her child's future. Love did not erase struggle, but it made her stronger than every obstacle she faced, because loving her child gave her a reason to rise every day, and prepared her for the moment destiny would bring past and present face to face again. Seraphine entered the world quietly, but her presence carried a warmth strong enough to change every room she stepped into. From the moment she was born, there was something undeniably special about her. Her eyes were bright, filled with gentle curiosity, as if she came into life already searching for meaning. She didn't just exist, she brought life to everything around her. As she grew older, her features became a beautiful reflection of both parents without her even knowing it. She carried Ariella's grace in the way she moved, gentle yet confident, and unknowingly she held Caden's spark, a certain liveliness in her gaze, a quiet intelligence that made people pause when she spoke. People noticed her without her ever trying to stand out. Teachers admired her manners, neighbors adored her respectful nature. She had an aura that made others feel safe around her. She wasn't loud or demanding, yet her presence always mattered. She laughed easily. She cared deeply. She brought warmth into cold days just by being herself. Seraphine wasn't merely a child growing up. She was light in human form, the living proof that even from heartbreak, something beautiful could rise. Seraphine carried a natural brightness that didn't need attention to shine. She woke up every morning with enthusiasm, ready to greet the day with a smile that could soften even the hardest mood. She found joy in simple things, the way sunlight touched the window, the taste of warm breakfast, the sound of laughter in a playground. Her happiness wasn't loud, it was sincere, and it had a way of spreading to anyone near her. She was thoughtful in ways surprising for someone her age. If someone felt sad, she noticed. If someone needed help, she stepped forward without hesitation. She shared easily, cared genuinely, and listened with full attention. She asked questions not to disturb, but because her mind was curious and alive, always wanting to understand the world more deeply. Teachers admired her respectful attitude. Friends trusted her easily because she never judged or mocked. Even strangers felt drawn to her kindness. She carried herself with gentle confidence, not boastful, not timid, simply balanced. There was a spark in her laughter, a calm in her silence, and a sweetness in how she embraced life. Seraphine wasn't just a happy child. She was the kind of joy that made others believe goodness still existed. Seraphine and Ariella didn't simply share a home, they shared a heart. Their bond was built through quiet nights, shared smiles, whispered comfort, and years of standing side by side through every challenge life placed before them. Ariella wasn't just a provider. She was warmth, guidance, and a safe place Seraphine could always return to. And Seraphine wasn't just a child, she was Ariella's strength, her reminder that love can heal what life once tried to break. They laughed together often. They cooked side by side, creating small traditions that belonged only to them. They told stories before bedtime, arms wrapped around each other as if the world beyond their walls didn't matter. Whenever Seraphine fell, Ariella lifted her gently. Whenever Ariella felt tired, Seraphine noticed and wrapped her tiny arms around her, offering comfort beyond her age. They understood each other without always needing words. One look was enough. One smile said everything. Their home might not have been filled with luxury, but it was filled with love so powerful that it shaped Seraphine into the bright soul she became. They weren't just mother and daughter. They were each other's home. As Seraphine grew older, curiosity naturally followed. She was surrounded by friends who spoke about family pictures, Father's Day cards, and weekend outings with dads. She listened politely, smiling for them. But sometimes her quiet eyes drifted away in thought. She never felt unloved, Ariella made sure of that, but there was a gentle space in her heart filled with questions she didn't quite know how to ask. One evening, after a long day at school, she sat beside her mother on the couch. The room was calm, filled only with the soft hum of the night. Seraphine played with her fingers nervously, building courage. She glanced up, studying her mother's face, as if making sure it was safe to speak. "Mum," she said softly, her voice careful and sincere, "do I have a dad somewhere?" The question didn't come with accusation. It wasn't demanding. It was tender, honest, and filled with innocent longing. She wasn't searching for drama. She simply wanted to understand where she came from, to know if someone out there shared her heartbeat, her smile, her existence. In that moment, time felt still. Ariella's heart tightened gently, not in anger, but in emotion. She knew this question would one day come. And now, it finally had. Ariella didn't rush to answer. She took a slow breath, steadying the swirl of emotions within her. Then she turned fully toward Seraphine, lifting a gentle hand to brush a stray curl from her daughter's face. There was warmth in her eyes, not sadness. Strength, not avoidance. She refused to let this truth carry bitterness. "Yes," she said softly, her voice calm and loving. "You do." Seraphine's eyes brightened slightly, curiosity deepening, but Ariella continued with careful tenderness. "He's out there," she said, smiling faintly. "And one day, when the time is right, destiny will decide when you meet him." She didn't speak with anger. She didn't fill the moment with blame. She protected her daughter's heart from unnecessary pain. Instead of painting a story of abandonment or betrayal, she painted hope. She allowed Seraphine to know she wasn't incomplete. She wasn't unwanted. Her origin wasn't built on shame. Seraphine leaned into her mother's embrace, letting the comfort of that reassurance settle into her heart. There were still questions, yes, but she trusted her mother's promise. She trusted the patience behind it. They stayed like that for a while, holding each other, wrapped in warmth and quiet understanding. And in that moment, destiny listened, waiting for the day it would keep that promise. Time did not pause for Caden. The world kept moving. Deals continued. Meetings filled his calendar. His name remained powerful, and life around him appeared steady. Yet quietly, the years slipped by, one after another, without asking whether his heart was ready to keep going. He changed in ways only silence could notice. His laughter, once free and unforced, became rare. His expressions became more controlled, more practiced, like someone carefully maintaining a mask he no longer remembered how to remove. People celebrated him publicly, but privately, each passing year carried a weight that grew heavier. He didn't count these years by achievements anymore. He counted them by something far more personal, how long it had been since he last felt truly understood, truly valued, truly held by someone who cared about the man, not the legend. And those years felt endless. On the surface, Caden's life looked brighter than ever. His company expanded globally. New partnerships formed. Awards filled shelves. Conferences praised his leadership. Journalists admired his brilliance. Every professional milestone painted a picture of victory. To the outside world, he was living proof of success. But success cannot substitute fulfillment. The brighter his business world shined, the dimmer his personal world became. He would return home to silence. He would sit in beautifully furnished spaces that still somehow felt empty. Achievements brought applause, but no peace. Celebrations ended quickly, leaving quiet stillness behind. He began to realize that growth in business did not heal personal wounds. Every accomplishment felt strangely incomplete, like a gift missing its meaning. People celebrated the empire he built, but no one noticed the quiet sadness forming in the man who built it. Money continued to flow into Caden's world. His net worth soared. Investments multiplied. Properties, assets, influence, everything society measures as success increased. Yet with every new acquisition, something inside him felt strangely thinner. The more he gained, the less fulfilled he felt. Wealth filled his bank accounts, but it couldn't fill the quiet space inside his heart. He bought penthouses, yet none of them felt like home. He attended elite gatherings surrounded by people, yet felt alone in the center of crowded rooms. Expensive suits, luxury cars, powerful meetings. None of it gave him the warmth of belonging. He had access to everything life could offer, except the one thing he silently longed for. Real connection, real peace, real happiness. He didn't know how to say it out loud. But slowly, wealth stopped feeling like victory and started feeling like a reminder of everything money couldn't fix. Over the years, Caden tried to move forward. He allowed people into his life, hoping companionship might ease the quiet ache inside him. There were women who admired his influence, who enjoyed his lifestyle, who fit well into his public image. But none of those connections reached his heart. Conversations often felt shallow. Smiles lacked sincerity. Moments that should have felt meaningful seemed staged, as if everyone was performing roles rather than building something real. They admired the figure he represented, not the man he truly was underneath. And every time a relationship ended, it reminded him of how rare genuine connection truly is. One by one, these attempts faded, leaving him emptier than before. Each failure didn't just end a chapter, it deepened the awareness that something precious had once existed, and he let it slip away. The passing years didn't erase Ariella from Caden's mind. Instead, her memory settled deeper into his thoughts, living quietly in spaces he never spoke about. On quiet nights, those two words haunted him. What if? What if he had defended her boldly? What if he had chosen love over pressure? What if he hadn't allowed fear to speak louder than his heart? Those questions lingered like shadows, following him through victories, through boardrooms, through silent evenings where the city lights glittered beneath his window but offered no comfort. He wondered how different life might have been if he had simply held on, if he had protected her the way she deserved. Regret didn't yell inside him. It whispered, constantly, and each whisper reminded him that sometimes the greatest pain in life isn't losing something by force. It's losing something you had the chance to fight for and didn't. No matter how much time passed, Ariella remained in Caden's thoughts like a chapter he could never completely close. Certain moments triggered memories without warning. A familiar fragrance in a hallway, a woman's gentle laugh in a restaurant, the sight of someone standing quietly beneath city lights. Little things reminded him of her calm voice, her thoughtful eyes, the way she once made him feel seen beyond success. Sometimes he would find himself replaying old memories, their late conversations, quiet walks, the warmth in her smile when she looked at him without judgment. Those memories didn't fade, they sharpened with time, becoming clearer as everything else blurred. He didn't speak about her to anyone. He kept her presence tucked silently in his heart. She wasn't just part of his past, she was the piece he realized he lost. With each passing year, the emptiness inside Caden didn't fade, it deepened. He carried himself with strength in public, but privately, he felt the quiet weight of loneliness settle deeper into his chest. Nights became longer. Silence became heavier. He would sometimes sit in his luxurious living room, surrounded by everything he once dreamed of achieving, and still feel an ache nothing could soothe. There were moments he tried to distract himself, burying his thoughts in work or surrounding himself with people. But once the noise faded, the emptiness remained. It wasn't loud, but it was constant, a quiet reminder that success without emotional fulfillment is only half a life. He didn't just miss companionship, he missed purpose in his heart. And somewhere deep inside, he knew the source of that missing piece had once stood right in front of him. And he let her go. Before we continue, I want to pause and ask you watching right now. Caden isn't a villain. He isn't heartless. He made a mistake. A painful, life-altering mistake driven by pressure, fear, and hesitation. He didn't betray Ariella with lies or cruelty. He failed her by not standing strong when she needed certainty. And now, years later, he lives with the consequences. Regret is his daily companion. Loneliness is his quiet punishment. So here's the question. Do you believe he deserves forgiveness? Should a man be judged forever for one heartbreaking moment of weakness? Or should growth, remorse, and the pain he carries count for something? If you were in Ariella's place, would you ever consider giving him another chance to prove the strength he lacked before? Share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know how you feel. And if you're still deeply invested in this story, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because what happens next will change everything. As part of Harrington Technologies' community commitment, a new outreach project was introduced. A program focused on supporting small schools that lacked funding but held incredible potential. It wasn't just a business strategy. It was meant to create hope where resources were scarce. A team selected several schools, planning renovations, educational resources, and development programs that would improve learning environments for countless children. One of those chosen schools stood in a quiet neighborhood filled with hard-working families. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't have elite facilities, but it had students who were bright, determined, and full of promise. Teachers worked tirelessly with limited supplies, hoping someone would eventually notice their dedication. This project meant everything to them. News spread quickly across the district. The Harrington Foundation had chosen their school. Excitement rippled through students and staff. Preparations began. Banners were hung. Children practiced songs and speeches. The school buzzed with anticipation, grateful that someone powerful finally decided their future mattered. They didn't know it yet. But this outreach visit would not only change classrooms and buildings, it would reopen a chapter of life that had been silent for far too long. Because destiny wasn't finished with its plan, and it was about to move in ways no one could predict. Normally, Caden rarely attended community outreach events in person. He funded them, approved them, supported them. But his schedule was always crowded with corporate obligations. Most visits were handled by representatives, executives, or foundation officials who reported back afterward. That was how things usually worked. But this time felt different. On the morning of the school event, Caden glanced at the calendar entry on his tablet. He could have easily delegated it like always, yet something inside him resisted that routine. He stared at the appointment longer than necessary, feeling a strange pull. No business urgency demanded his presence. No publicity strategy required him to go. Still, he couldn't shake the quiet thought forming in his mind. You should be there. It wasn't logical. It wasn't planned. It was simply a steady nudge his heart refused to ignore. So he closed his tablet, adjusted his suit, and informed his team he would personally attend. Shock rippled through his staff. His executive assistant questioned whether it was a wise use of time, but he didn't argue or explain. He simply said calmly, "I need to be there." He didn't know why. He just knew something meaningful waited ahead. And without realizing it, his decision set destiny back into motion. The day of the event arrived, and the school buzzed with excitement long before Caden's car pulled through the gates. Children gathered in colorful uniforms. Teachers tried to maintain order while hiding their own excitement, and banners stretched proudly across the courtyard. This wasn't just a visit. It felt like hope walking through their doors. Then the black car rolled in. Security stepped out first, followed by foundation officials. Moments later, Caden emerged, and the school erupted in applause and joyful cheering. Children waved handmade signs. Some clapped, some shouted his name proudly, and others simply stared in amazement. Cameras flashed as media crews captured every moment, documenting what appeared to be another powerful philanthropic gesture from a respected leader. He smiled, nodded kindly to the children, and shook hands with staff. The principal welcomed him warmly, pride shining in her expression as she guided him through the school grounds. Students sang an uplifting welcome song. Parents stood quietly at the edges, grateful and hopeful. To everyone else, this was a generous visit from a billionaire supporting education. To Caden, it felt strangely personal, as if life had drawn him there for more than publicity or charity. He didn't know it yet, but his heart was about to recognize something his mind could not prepare for. As the tour continued, Caden walked through decorated hallways filled with colorful drawings, motivational posters, and the lively energy of young students eager to impress. He greeted teachers, nodded politely to parents, and listened as the principal proudly explained upcoming renovation plans. Everything felt routine, organized. Until it didn't. They entered the open courtyard, where a group of children stood ready to perform a short presentation. Lined up neatly, they held project charts, smiling nervously as everyone settled to watch. Caden positioned himself near the front, giving them his full attention out of respect. That was when his eyes found her. A little girl stood among the students, bright eyes, gentle features, a calm confidence that seemed far beyond her age. She wasn't trying to stand out, yet somehow she did. There was warmth in her smile, kindness in her expression, and something incredibly familiar in the way she looked at the world. For a moment, Caden forgot where he was. The noise faded. Applause blurred. Voices disappeared. It felt as though time slowed just enough for his heart to react before his mind understood why. His chest tightened unexpectedly, and an unfamiliar emotion rose within him, not fear, not confusion, but something deeply personal. He didn't know her. Yet, something inside him responded to her existence. And he couldn't look away. Caden tried to refocus on the presentation, but his attention kept drifting back to the little girl. There was something in her presence that wouldn't let him simply treat her like another smiling student. The tilt of her head when she listened carefully. The spark in her eyes when she laughed softly with another child. Even the gentle confidence in the way she stood felt strangely known to him. A quiet shiver moved through his chest. It wasn't recognition in the sense of memory. He had never seen her before. Yet, deep within him, something stirred with unsettling familiarity. She smiled at one point, and for a split second, he felt his breath hitch. There was warmth in that smile, warmth he had missed for years. It reminded him of soft evenings and gentle laughter that once belonged to another time in his life. His heart reacted long before his mind dared to question why. Why did looking at a child he'd never met feel like remembering someone? Why did her presence feel personal when logic said it shouldn't? He shifted slightly, but his gaze remained locked on her, unable to detach himself. The world saw a school child, but Caden felt something much deeper, something that shook him quietly from the inside. He didn't understand it, yet he couldn't deny it. As the program continued, Caden found himself strangely affected by the little girl's presence. Whenever she laughed, an unexpected warmth spread quietly through his chest. Whenever she spoke, confidently yet gently, he felt a softness he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't fascination, it wasn't curiosity, it was something far more personal, something he couldn't explain even to himself. He watched the way she treated others, how she helped a classmate who stumbled over words, how she listened attentively to her teacher, how kindness seemed natural for her, not performed for attention. There was grace in her innocence, and a sense of familiarity he couldn't shake. For a man who lived surrounded by pressure, restraint, and responsibility, her simple existence felt healing. Like comfort he didn't know he needed until that moment. His gaze returned to her again and again, not out of obligation, but because something deep within him needed to. It felt like being reminded of a feeling he had lost long ago. A strange connection without explanation, a gentle warmth without reason, a pull he couldn't logically justify. He didn't know who she was, but standing there, surrounded by applause and noise, she was the only presence that truly reached him. After the visit ended, Caden returned to his car with the same composed expression everyone expected from him. He shook hands, thanked the staff, and offered polite words of appreciation. Cameras clicked. Journalists smiled. The world saw a generous leader fulfilling another charitable commitment. But once the doors closed and silence returned, his composure faded. He leaned back against the seat, staring out the window as the school grew smaller in the distance. Yet the image of that little girl refused to leave his mind. Her bright eyes, her gentle smile, the warmth she carried, it stayed with him like a quiet echo he couldn't silence. That evening, while reviewing documents in his office, he found himself pausing, distracted by thoughts of her. At night, as he stood near his penthouse window, the memory of her presence returned again. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. but he couldn't ignore the unexplainable connection he felt. Who was she? Why did seeing her feel so deeply personal? Why did it feel like fate had placed her in front of him for a reason? He didn't have answers. All he knew was that for the first time in years, something inside his heart felt awake again. A few days after the outreach event, life returned to its usual rhythm at the school. Classes resumed, laughter filled the hallways, and children carried on with their cheerful routines. Seraphine, as always, participated with her bright energy, eager spirit, and gentle enthusiasm. It was sports day, a day filled with excitement, friendly competition, and joy. But somewhere between excitement and effort, her small body began to tire more than anyone expected. She pushed herself, smiling through the exhaustion, determined not to worry anyone. Then slowly, her steps weakened, her vision blurred. The noise around her faded into distant echoes. Before anyone could fully react, Seraphine swayed, then collapsed to the ground. Screams erupted. Children gasped. Teachers rushed forward in panic. In seconds, chaos replaced joy. Coaches lifted her carefully, calling her name desperately as her eyelids fluttered, her breathing shallow and weak. The school rushed her to the nurse's room. Emergency numbers were dialed, and fear filled every corner of the building. For years, destiny had waited patiently. Now, it decided the time had come, and this single moment would change every life connected to her forever. Ariella was in the middle of work when her phone rang, the kind of call that instantly steals breath from your lungs. The school's number flashed on the screen. For a split second, her heart stilled. She answered quickly, voice trembling even before she spoke. "Hello, this is Seraphine's mother." The voice on the other end sounded calm but urgent, explaining what happened. "Please don't panic, but Seraphine fainted during activities. She's being attended to. We need you to come immediately." The world tilted. Papers slipped from Ariella's hand. Her pulse raced. She didn't wait for more details. She grabbed her bag and rushed out, barely aware of her surroundings. Her mind flooded with fear, guilt, and desperate prayer. Every second felt like a lifetime as she hurried toward the school, whispering her daughter's name under her breath, pleading silently for her to be safe. Traffic lights felt agonizingly slow. Footsteps felt too heavy. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. Nothing in her life mattered more than reaching her child. She didn't know it yet, but while rushing to protect her daughter, she was also running straight toward the past she had tried so hard to leave behind. While chaos unfolded, the school immediately contacted the Harrington Foundation as protocol, since Seraphine had recently interacted with them during the outreach event. Caden happened to be nearby in a meeting when his team relayed the news. A child from the sponsored school had collapsed. Without hesitation, he stood up and left. He didn't send an assistant. He didn't delegate concern. He went himself. Moments later, he arrived at the school and moved swiftly through the hallway, guided toward the nurse's room. Despite years of training himself to remain calm under pressure, his chest tightened with worry. He didn't even understand why this situation affected him so deeply, only that it did. He stopped by the doorway, breath held, eyes fixed on the small figure lying on the bed inside. Nurses surrounded Seraphine, checking her pulse, monitoring her breathing, assuring staff she was stable. Caden didn't speak. He simply stood there, frozen, concerned, inexplicably shaken. He didn't know why this child mattered to him so intensely. He only knew that in that moment, nothing else in the world felt as important as her safety, and fate waited silently beside him, because the next heartbeat would change everything. Ariella finally reached the school, rushing through the hallway with trembling breaths. She followed the directions given to her, every step echoing with fear. When she turned the final corner and saw the nurse's room ahead, she slowed. Not because she wanted to, but because her heart felt like it might break. She took one step closer. Then she saw him. Caden stood near the doorway, his posture tense, eyes fixed inside the room with raw concern. For a moment, Ariella stopped breathing. 10 years of buried memories collided in a single second. The man she once loved, the man who broke her heart, the man she never expected to face again. He sensed movement and turned, and their eyes locked. Time did not simply pause, it shattered. Neither spoke, neither moved. Their expressions told stories words couldn't carry. Pain flickered in his gaze. Shock flooded hers. Years of separation, regret, unanswered emotions filled the silent space between them. 10 years since the last goodbye. 10 years since love fell apart. And now they stood inches apart again. Because of the child fate had kept hidden, their reunion wasn't loud, it was silent. And somehow, that silence hurt more than any confrontation ever could. The hallway fell into a silence so powerful it almost felt like sound had been stolen from the air. They stood facing each other, both stunned, both unable to shape words that could carry the weight of 10 lost years. No greetings, no accusations, no explanations, just raw emotion quietly raging beneath controlled expressions. Ariella's chest tightened as memories flooded back. The love they shared, the pain she carried, the strength she had to build without him. She swallowed hard, forcing tears back, because this moment wasn't about the past. It was about her child. Caden stared at her with disbelief and something far deeper. The sight of her felt unreal. She wasn't just a memory anymore. She was here, real, breathing, standing only a few feet away. He wanted to speak her name, but his voice refused to move. So they simply stood there, sharing a silence full of everything they never resolved. Years of love, years of hurt, years of what if. And in the middle of that silence, destiny waited patiently, because the moment that would shatter every barrier between them was only seconds away. Inside the room, the nurse's gentle voice broke the tension as she finished checking Seraphine. "She's stable now," she assured calmly. "Just exhausted. She needs rest, water, and a bit more care at home. Children are strong. Your daughter will be just fine." The words floated into the hallway like a sudden shockwave. Your daughter. Caden's mind didn't process it at first. It sounded simple, routine. Something said every day to concerned parents. But the moment his heart caught up to the sentence, his body went still. Slowly, almost fearfully, he turned his gaze from the nurse to Ariella. His heartbeat surged painfully. Daughter. The room no longer felt like a school clinic. It felt like the entire world narrowed to one truth suspended in the air, demanding to be faced. Ariella's eyes filled with emotion she could no longer hide. Her breathing deepened, as if her chest struggled under a weight she had carried alone for years. Silence returned, but this time it was different. This silence wasn't confusion. It was revelation, trembling on the edge of breaking everything open. The words echoed relentlessly inside Caden's head. Your daughter. It was as if his entire world cracked in half. His throat tightened. His eyes widened, not in anger, but in overwhelming realization. 10 years. 10 entire years of life he never knew existed. Birthdays he never celebrated, first words he never heard, tears he never wiped, laughter he never shared, a childhood he unknowingly missed. His chest burned with emotions too heavy to contain. Shock collided with heartbreak. Confusion clashed with guilt. A deep ache rushed through him as his mind raced to understand how such a monumental truth could exist without him knowing. He looked at Ariella again, but this time not as the woman who once loved him, not as the woman who left. He looked at her as the mother of a child he never knew he had. His breathing grew unsteady. His hand unconsciously gripped the side of the doorway, as if his body needed support to hold the crushing realization. A tear escaped his eye before he could stop it. He wasn't furious. He was shattered, because in that devastating instant, he understood that life had silently written a chapter of love without him in it. He swallowed hard, struggling to steady his voice. For a moment, he couldn't speak at all. The words refused to come, trapped behind shock and heartbreak. Finally, with trembling breath, he managed to whisper the only question his soul could form. Your daughter. His voice cracked. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't accusation. It was raw pain, wrapped in disbelief. His eyes searched Ariella's, desperately hoping there was some mistake, yet terrified there wasn't. He wanted an explanation, but he also didn't, because deep down, something inside him already knew the answer. Ariella's lips trembled, tears gathered, shining against the weight she had carried alone for years. She couldn't hide. She couldn't run. Destiny had cornered the truth. She slowly lowered her gaze, then lifted it again, meeting his eyes with honesty and heartbreak. Her silence said everything. 10 years of secrets stood between them in that single question. He took a shaking breath, his voice softer now, filled with wounded disbelief. "She's mine." The hallway seemed to stop breathing. 1, heartbeat. 2, the truth was no longer avoidable. What came next would change every part of their lives forever. Ariella closed her eyes for a brief second, gathering every ounce of courage she had left. Years of silence pressed heavily on her chest. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "She's yours." The words broke free, and with them came emotions she had carried alone for a decade. Her voice trembled as tears escaped, not from shame, but from the sheer weight of truth finally stepping into the light. "I found out after everything fell apart. I wanted to tell you. I did. But your world, it wasn't safe, it wasn't gentle, and I couldn't risk her being swallowed by it." Her voice quivered, but her honesty remained steady. "I raised her alone, not because I wanted to punish you, but because I wanted to protect her." Caden's chest rose sharply as the reality fully anchored into his soul. There was no denying it now, no misunderstanding. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't speculation. This was truth, living, breathing, and sleeping just a few feet away in that nurse's room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there. Two hearts shattered in different ways. Finally facing the truth, fate had waited 10 years to reveal. The strength both of them tried so hard to maintain finally broke. Ariella turned slightly away, covering her mouth as tears slipped uncontrollably down her face. She wasn't crying because she regretted loving her child. She cried because she knew this moment would eventually come, and yet nothing could prepare her for its emotional weight. Every sacrifice, every lonely night, every time she wished things had been different, all of it flooded back at once. Across from her, Caden's vision blurred. His breath trembled as silent tears escaped, surprising even him. He wasn't a man who cried easily, but this pain wasn't something strength could hide. This wasn't about pride. This wasn't about ego. This was heartbreak in its purest form. The pain of a father realizing he had unknowingly missed a decade of his child's life. Neither tried to accuse. Neither tried to justify. They simply stood there crying, grieving the years they could never retrieve. 10 years of birthdays he didn't know existed. 10 years of motherhood she carried alone. 10 years of memories lost forever. Their tears were not weakness. They were the emotional release of two souls finally forced to confront everything fate had kept hidden. If this were a different man, anger might have come first. Accusations, shouting, blame. But Caden didn't feel fury. He felt heartbreak. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He simply stood there, shoulders heavy, eyes filled with devastation. His voice came out broken, barely above a whisper. "She grew up without me." There was no hatred in his tone, only pain. A father's grief. A man mourning years he could never get back. He wasn't thinking about image. He wasn't thinking about the past argument. He wasn't thinking about himself at all. He was thinking about the little girl inside that room, the child who carried his smile, the child who slept through storms without knowing her father existed, the child who called someone mama every day, but never once had the chance to say dad. His heart ached, not because he had been deceived, but because he had been absent from the most precious years of a life that was part of him. He closed his eyes, tears slipping silently. Not rage, just pure, soul-deep heartbreak. After the nurse confirmed Seraphine would be fine and arrangements were made for her to rest, the hallway slowly emptied. Teachers stepped away. Staff gave space, The noise faded until only soft footsteps and distant school sounds remained. Caden and Ariella stood near the doorway for a moment, both still shaken, both struggling to control emotions that refused to settle. The principal gently suggested they talk somewhere private. Without protest, they agreed. They walked into a quiet room nearby, just the two of them. No cameras, no audience, no pressure from the world, just two people who once loved deeply, now standing across from each other after 10 years of silence, with a lifetime of truth between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Ariella stood with her back slightly against the wall, arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to hold everything together. Caden stood a few steps away, hands trembling slightly at his sides. He looked at her not with anger, but with wounded emotion, eyes still red from tears he failed to hide earlier. The silence wasn't hostile. It was heavy, but meaningful. They both knew they couldn't avoid this conversation. Too much had happened. Too much truth had finally surfaced. It was time to face everything they once ran from. Finally, Caden took a slow breath. "We need to talk," he said softly. And for the first time in 10 years, they allowed themselves to truly speak. Caden stood there for a moment, trying to steady his breathing. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It carried quiet pain instead of anger. When he finally spoke, it sounded like a man holding himself together by sheer strength. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why didn't you tell me?" There was no accusation in his tone, just heartbreak. His eyes weren't filled with fury. They were filled with grief. Grief for the years stolen. Grief for the moments he missed. Grief for the life he never knew existed. Each word trembled slightly, like it hurt him to even say them. "I had a right to know I had a child. Ariella, I should have been there. You should have told me." His voice weakened. "Do you know how it feels to discover your daughter exists this way? To realize I've been absent from her entire life, without even knowing I had one to cherish?" Ariella lowered her gaze, tears gathering again. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't dismissive. She felt his pain, because she lived her own version of it for 10 years. Her fingers tightened slightly, as if bracing herself for the emotional weight she was about to carry. "Caden," she whispered, her voice trembling. It wasn't simple. It wasn't out of cruelty. It wasn't to punish you. He waited, silently pleading for an explanation that could help his heart make sense of the unbearable loss. And with a shaky breath, Ariella prepared to finally open the part of her soul she had locked away for a decade. Ariella drew in a slow breath, tears gently lining her lashes as she finally allowed herself to revisit the part of her past she had tried to lock away for years. "When everything happened back then, I didn't just lose you," she began softly. "I lost the man who promised to believe in me. I lost the person who once made me feel safe. The world turned against me, and the person I thought would stand by me hesitated." Her voice cracked, but she continued, determined to tell the truth completely. "I was hurt, Caden, deeply hurt. Not because of your title, not because of your world, but because when the world questioned my worth, you didn't fight for me, you didn't hold on. That broke something inside me." She placed a hand on her chest. "So when I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't just a woman in love anymore. I became a mother, and my decisions were no longer about what I wanted. They were about what my child needed. Your world was loud, harsh, judgmental. People around you treated emotions like weakness and treated me like an inconvenience." Tears rolled down freely now. "I didn't trust that environment to raise a child. I didn't trust the people who controlled everything around you. And yes, a part of me didn't trust you to protect us either. Not after you didn't protect me when it mattered most." She wiped her eyes gently, voice steadying despite her tears. "I didn't hide her because I hated you. I hid her because I loved her enough to protect her from a world I no longer felt safe in." Caden listened in silence, every word striking deeper than he expected. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He simply absorbed the truth he had avoided facing for years. When she finished, he closed his eyes briefly, as if accepting a painful reality he could no longer deny. "You're right," he said quietly. There was no hesitation, No excuses, no justification. I failed you. His voice carried raw honesty, the kind that only comes from a man finally willing to face his mistakes. I should have stood beside you. I should have chosen you over image, over pressure, over everyone who thought they had the right to control my personal life. He swallowed, emotion thickening his tone. I let fear speak louder than love. I let others convince me that protecting my position mattered more than protecting your heart. He shook his head slowly, regret weighing heavily on his shoulders. I can't defend what I did. I can't rewrite that moment, and I can't pretend it didn't break something precious between us. His eyes softened with painful sincerity. You were right to feel betrayed. You were right to feel abandoned. He looked at her with genuine remorse. And you're right. I didn't deserve your trust then. For the first time, he openly admitted it. Not as a powerful CEO, not as a man trying to justify himself, but as someone who finally understood the pain he caused. And that honesty, though painful, became the first real step toward healing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke after Caden's confession. The silence no longer carried hostility, it carried vulnerability. Something softened gently between them, not instantly fixed, but no longer locked in bitterness. Ariella wiped her tears slowly. I'm sorry too, she said softly. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm sorry for the shock. I'm sorry you missed so much. Because I know this hurts you deeply. Her voice trembled. I didn't make this choice lightly, but I still made it without you, and for that, I truly am sorry. Caden shook his head gently, tears lingering in his eyes. You carried everything alone. You went through pregnancy, birth, sleepless nights, fears, responsibilities, without help. You shouldn't have had to. He exhaled shakily. For that, I am sorry, deeply sorry. They weren't arguing. They weren't defending. They were acknowledging pain. Honestly, I should have trusted you back then, Ariella whispered. I should have fought for you, Caden replied. Both apologies didn't erase the past. They didn't magically fix the wounds, but they created something powerful, understanding. For the first time since everything shattered, they were no longer standing on opposite sides of blame. They were simply two people who once loved deeply, finally admitting how badly life had hurt them both. Their conversation didn't end in shouting, accusations, or chaos. Instead, it settled into something far more powerful, calm honesty. Two adults, shaped by time and hardship, speaking from a place of growth rather than pride. There was pain, yes, but there was also understanding. There were tears, but no bitterness. There were regrets, but also acceptance. They talked about Seraphine, not as a burden, not as a secret, but as the precious life that now bound them forever. Caden spoke gently, still shaken, but determined. I don't want to lose any more time with her, he said quietly. Even if I wasn't there before, I want to be here now. However you allow me, whatever you feel is safe. I just want the chance to know my daughter. Ariella listened, truly listened. She could see sincerity in his eyes, not entitlement, not demand. Just a father aching to step into the life he never knew he had. I want what is best for her, she replied softly. If you truly want to be part of her life, we will figure it out. But this time, it has to be built on trust, no pressure, no guilt, just what's right for her. He nodded. No shouting, no chaos, just two hearts choosing maturity over pride. Their wounds didn't disappear. Their history didn't vanish, but something changed. For the first time since everything fell apart. Healing finally began. Some men disappear when truth becomes heavy. Some retreat when reality demands responsibility. But Caden didn't move backward. He didn't escape behind status, pride, or excuses. After the shock settled into his heart, after the tears finally slowed, one thing became absolutely clear to him. He was a father, and he would not run. He didn't see Seraphine as a burden, an inconvenience, or a complication. He saw her as a blessing he hadn't known life had given him. The moment truth touched his soul, something inside him awakened, not guilt alone, but deep instinct. The instinct to protect, the instinct to care, the instinct to love. A lesser man might have blamed Ariella endlessly. A selfish man might have claimed rights without emotion, but Caden didn't do either. Standing there, outside the nurse's room, he made a silent promise, not to Ariella, not to the world, but to his daughter. "I won't fail you like I failed before." He didn't know where to start. He didn't know how to make up for lost time. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he was done allowing fear to control his choices. He would not stand on the sidelines again. He would not let hesitation steal any more years away. So when Seraphine finally opened her eyes, he stayed nearby, not demanding, not forcing himself into her world, just present, quietly, sincerely, steadily. He didn't walk away to process his emotions somewhere else. He remained where a father belongs, close, ready, determined. For once in his life, business wasn't the priority. Reputation wasn't the concern. Power didn't matter. A little girl did. And from that moment forward, Caden Harrington was no longer just a powerful figure in the world. He was a father who refused to run. In the days that followed, Caden didn't simply speak about wanting to be present. He proved it. He didn't approach fatherhood like a business project or a task to manage. He approached it with heart. For once, responsibility didn't feel heavy. It felt meaningful. Loving Seraphine wasn't an obligation. It was a privilege. He didn't push his way in. He didn't try to suddenly claim a place he hadn't earned yet. Instead, he chose patience. He chose consistency. He chose to show up again and again, so she wouldn't just know he existed. She would feel that he cared. He made room in his schedule. He cancelled meetings. He delayed trips. He reordered his entire life because for the first time in years, he finally had a reason that mattered more than work. He wasn't trying to be the perfect father overnight. He was trying to be a present one. Ariella watched him carefully during those first few moments of adjustment. She had every right to doubt, every right to be protective, every right to question whether this change would remain permanent. But what she saw wasn't a man driven by guilt alone. She saw a man awakening to love he didn't even know he had missed. He asked questions. He listened. He wanted to understand Seraphine's routines, her habits, her fears, her joys. He wasn't entering her life to disrupt it. He wanted to join it respectfully. There was no pride in him anymore, no ego, no defensiveness. Just a father, humbled by truth, determined to build something beautiful with the time he had left. He chose responsibility. He chose presence. He chose love. And this time, he refused to let anything scare him away. Caden didn't step into Seraphine's life like a stranger trying to claim space. He stepped in like someone willing to learn. He attended school meetings not as a powerful sponsor, but as a father quietly sitting at the back, listening carefully to teachers describe her strengths, habits, and little quirks in class. He smiled proudly hearing how kind she was, how thoughtful, how bright. Every compliment felt personal. Every praise touched his heart. He learned her world slowly, her favorite snacks, the way she scrunched her nose when thinking, the songs she hummed absent-mindedly. He learned she loved books, enjoyed drawing, and adored silly jokes, especially when he failed to tell them properly. And, yes, he failed often. His sense of humor was awkward at first, and she giggled every time he tried too hard. But those giggles became his favorite sound. He did normal dad things proudly. He walked her to school when he could, helped with homework, reading aloud dramatically, far too dramatically, making her laugh so hard she almost couldn't breathe. He tried to braid her hair once. It looked nothing like a braid, more like tangled ribbon chaos. She laughed, then patiently showed him how to do it right, guiding his hands one motion at a time. He listened like a student, eager to get it perfect next time. He brought warmth into her days, but she brought healing into his life. They shared quiet moments too, sitting together, talking, sometimes not talking at all, just existing peacefully as father and daughter. No pressure, no rush, just heart and connection. Slowly, naturally, their bond grew. He didn't feel like a guest anymore. He began to feel like what he truly was, her father, and every new moment with her became something he silently treasured, wishing he could press them into his heart forever. Children have a special way of seeing beyond complications adults struggle with. Where grown hearts hesitate, a child's heart simply feels. Seraphine didn't see wealth, reputation, or history when she looked at Caden. She saw kindness in his eyes. She saw gentleness in the way he spoke to her. She saw effort, genuine effort, in every small thing he did. And slowly, beautifully, she accepted him. At first, she watched him with curious caution, studying this new figure who suddenly appeared in her life. But soon, hesitation faded. She started smiling more freely when he arrived. She called his name with excitement when she saw him. She reached for his hand without fear. She laughed openly around him, comfortable in his presence, as if her heart already understood what her mind was still learning. This wasn't a stranger. This was her father. There came a day when she rested her head against his chest while they sat together, and Caden froze for just a second, overwhelmed by the simplicity of that trust. She didn't ask him to prove himself with grand gestures. She didn't judge him for years he missed. She didn't carry resentment. She simply allowed him into her world, and that acceptance healed him in ways nothing else ever could. Ariella watched quietly from a distance many times, witnessing something she once feared might never happen. Instead of resistance, she saw love forming. Instead of emotional distance, she saw connection growing naturally, not forced, not rushed, just sincere. Seraphine didn't just accept him, she welcomed him. And in doing so, she gave Caden something priceless, not just the title of father, but the chance to live it. Every day forward. Reconnection didn't happen suddenly. It didn't come from dramatic speeches or rushed emotions. It began quietly, almost cautiously, like two old melodies slowly finding their rhythm again. After the truth came out and Seraphine firmly settled into Caden's life, something unexpected began to unfold between him and Ariella. Conversations that once ended in tension now carried calm understanding. Moments that would have been filled with guarded silence now allowed room for gentle words. Sometimes it was as simple as sharing updates about Seraphine, standing together after school, or sitting nearby during her activities. Other times it meant talking, truly talking, not as people stuck in the past, but as individuals who had grown and survived pain. They didn't rush what was forming. They allowed space. They allowed breathing room. They allowed sincerity. There were soft smiles where there used to be distance. There were thoughtful glances that carried gratitude rather than resentment. Slowly, the storm that once destroyed everything no longer defined them. They were not just two people who had hurt each other. They were two people who had lived, learned, and now found themselves walking towards something gentle again. Not because fate forced them, but because their hearts finally felt safe enough to try. For years, both Caden and Ariella had lived behind emotional walls. Hers were built from heartbreak, disappointment, and the instinct to protect herself and her child. His were built from regret, loneliness, and fear of ever trusting his heart again. But as days turned into weeks, those walls no longer felt necessary. They didn't collapse instantly. They softened. Ariella found herself noticing things she once loved about him. Not the power, not the influence, but the quiet tenderness in his actions. The way he listened, the way he tried, the way he looked at Seraphine with devotion that couldn't be faked. Those moments slowly eased the tension around her heart. Caden, on the other hand, noticed the strength she carried, not as a shield, but as dignity. He admired how she raised their daughter with grace, how she remained kind despite everything life threw at her. Her stability grounded him. Her presence felt warm again instead of distant. They still remembered their pain, but it no longer ruled them. Instead of emotional distance, there was openness. Instead of guarded silence, there was calm understanding. Their hearts didn't rush back into love. They carefully opened themselves to the possibility of it. Trust isn't restored with apologies alone. It is rebuilt through presence, consistency, and patience. And that is exactly what began to happen between Caden and Ariella. There were no grand promises, no dramatic declarations, just steady actions that slowly stitched confidence back together. Caden showed up. Not once. Not briefly. Consistently. He didn't disappear when things were uncomfortable. He didn't withdraw when emotions felt complicated. He communicated. He listened without interrupting. He respected her boundaries and honored her space. Every steady effort whispered something powerful. I won't walk away this time. Ariella, in return, allowed herself to trust gradually. She didn't hand over her heart blindly. She observed. She watched how he cared for Seraphine. She watched how he treated her, not as someone he needed to win back, but as someone he genuinely valued and respected. Slowly, safety began to replace fear. They began to share laughter again. Small, sincere laughter. They talked about life. They talked about growth. They even talked about the past without reopening wounds. Trust wasn't restored instantly. It was rebuilt piece by piece, until the distance between them didn't feel like a barrier anymore. It felt like history gently turning into peace. What began to grow between them wasn't a repeat of their past. It wasn't the youthful, hopeful love they once shared, the kind fueled by excitement and dreams alone. This was different. This was steadier, stronger, wiser, a love shaped by experience, tested by pain, and softened by growth. They didn't rush into romance. They didn't chase intense emotions. They allowed affection to develop naturally, rooted in understanding instead of fantasy. There were moments when their hands brushed unintentionally, and neither pulled away. Moments when they shared a quiet smile that held more meaning than words. Moments when they simply sat near each other in silence, not awkward, just peacefully connected. This new love wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm. Caden valued her differently now, not just as someone he adored, but as someone he honored. Ariella saw him differently too, not as the man who once failed her, but as the man who grew, learned, and refused to repeat that mistake. Their hearts didn't rush. They aligned. And slowly, affection returned, not as a memory revived, but as something beautifully reborn. Their reconnection wasn't rushed or forced. It unfolded with a quiet respect that made every moment meaningful. Caden approached Ariella not as someone entitled to a second chance, but as a man grateful for the smallest opportunity to simply exist peacefully beside her. He valued her comfort. He valued her boundaries. He valued her heart. He didn't try to erase the past. He acknowledged it and chose to build something better in the present. Ariella, in return, didn't approach him with guarded sharpness anymore. She spoke to him calmly. She listened without fear. She allowed him to be human, flawed, remorseful, but sincere. There was no rushing into labels, no expectation to immediately return to what they once were. Instead, they chose patience. They shared meals sometimes. They talked after spending time with Seraphine. They laughed gently at moments that once would have hurt. Every interaction carried warmth, dignity, and gratitude. Their connection didn't return with fire. It returned with peace. Two hearts choosing to meet again, not because time healed everything magically, but because they both chose kindness, effort, and emotional maturity this time around. Gradually, what once hurt them no longer defined them. The past lost its power to sting, replaced by gratitude for where they now stood. Healing didn't arrive with one magical moment. It came gently, through consistent grace, honest communication, and shared experiences. The weight they once carried began to lift, leaving space for something lighter, kinder, and warmer. Caden no longer looked at Ariella with regret alone. He looked at her with appreciation, for her strength, for the way she protected their child, for the love she never allowed bitterness to destroy. Ariella no longer looked at him with fear of disappointment. She looked at him with peace, acknowledging the man he became, not only the man he once was. Their story was no longer defined by heartbreak. It became defined by recovery, by patience, by forgiveness, by emotional courage. Healing didn't erase their history. It transformed it into wisdom. And as they stood quietly in this new season of their lives, something beautiful became clear. Love didn't just come back. It returned healthier, steadier, stronger than before. Evening rested gently over the city, painting the sky in shades of soft orange and fading gold. The world felt quieter, calmer, almost as if life itself wanted to pause and honor the moment. On a quiet hill overlooking Ridgecrest Heights, the wind carried a gentle breeze, the kind that doesn't chill. It soothes. Caden, Ariella, and Seraphine sat together, watching the sun slowly sink beyond the horizon. No rush, no noise, no tension, just peace stretching around them like a comforting embrace. For years life had been filled with storms, misunderstandings, heartbreak, loneliness, hidden truths. But here, none of that existed. Here, there was only calm. The sky glowed softly, reflecting something deeper inside each of them. Caden felt a stillness in his heart he hadn't known in years. Ariella felt a deep sense of relief, like breathing freely after holding pain for too long. The air felt lighter, time felt kinder, and everything finally matched the one word their hearts desperately needed: peace. They didn't need to speak loudly. They didn't need grand gestures. The moment itself was beautiful enough. Life had brought them through storms, and now it finally allowed them to rest beneath a peaceful sunset together. They didn't sit as strangers learning to coexist anymore. They didn't sit as two broken adults simply trying to tolerate one another for the sake of a child. They sat as something far more meaningful. They sat as a family. Caden sat close enough to feel the presence of both Ariella and Seraphine beside him, not needing to say anything to know this was right. Ariella sat with a softness in her eyes that hadn't existed for years, not because life suddenly became perfect, but because her heart finally felt safe. And Seraphine sat happily between them, unaware of how deeply symbolic her place was. She was not just physically in the middle. She was the bridge that brought everything back together. There was laughter, gentle, sincere laughter. There were shared smiles, quiet conversations, and moments where they said nothing at all yet understood everything. No tension hovered between them. No old wounds controlled the atmosphere. Just unity, just comfort, just the warmth of belonging. They were not the same people they were years ago. They were stronger now, kinder now, more grateful now. Life didn't just bring them back into each other's presence. It brought them back into each other's hearts. Seraphine leaned gently against both of them, one hand resting in her mother's and the other comfortably wrapped around Caden's fingers. She didn't understand the full weight of the journey that brought them here, but she understood something far more important. She felt loved, completely, beautifully loved. Her smile wasn't just cheerful, it was bright, pure, and deeply content. She glanced up at Caden with admiration, happy to have a father who didn't feel distant or unfamiliar anymore. Then she looked at her mother with the trust she had always known. To her young heart, this moment meant safety, joy, and a future where she didn't have to wonder anymore. She giggled softly at something Caden said, and Ariella joined the laughter. It wasn't forced laughter. It was natural and sweet, the sound of a heart free from worry. Watching her, Caden felt an ache of gratitude. He silently promised again never to fail this child, never to disappear from her world, never to let pride destroy what mattered most. Ariella watched Seraphine's happiness with tears in her eyes. Not tears of pain this time. Tears of fulfillment. Because nothing in life felt more perfect than seeing her daughter smiling between two parents finally united in love and peace. As the sun dipped lower, the moment didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a gentle beginning. The past no longer weighed on them like a shadow. Instead, it rested quietly as a reminder of what they overcame. Pain had done its damage, but love, patience, and growth had repaired what once felt impossible to fix. Caden glanced at Ariella, gratitude in his expression, not only for forgiveness, but for the strength she showed all these years. Ariella met his gaze, and there was no tension, no hesitation, only calm acceptance and respect. They didn't need dramatic words to seal this new chapter. The softness in their expressions said enough. Seraphine's laughter echoed softly as she pointed at the colorful sky, and they both looked with her. For once, they weren't worried about headlines, expectations, or fear. They were simply present. Life had wounded them. Love healed them. Family completed them. They sat there together, letting peace wrap around them, knowing that everything they once lost had returned in a way even more meaningful than before. This wasn't closure because love ended. It was closure because love finally found its rightful place. As night began to gently claim the sky, one truth settled quietly over them. This wasn't coincidence. This was life completing a story it never intended to leave unfinished. What once shattered had been rebuilt stronger. What once felt lost forever had returned in a way far more meaningful than before. Destiny didn't reunite them through force. It guided them through growth. Caden didn't just regain a daughter. Ariella didn't just regain a partner. Seraphine didn't just gain a father. A family was restored, not through perfection, not through flawless choices, but through courage, accountability, forgiveness, and love. The world still existed outside that peaceful hill, busy and loud, but in that moment nothing mattered beyond the three of them. The past was behind them. Hope stood ahead, and the present was finally everything their hearts once longed for. Sometimes, life takes people apart to teach them, shape them, and prepare them for the love they deserve. And sometimes, when the heart is finally ready, destiny brings everything back, not as it once was, but as it was always meant to be. And as they sat together beneath the quiet evening sky, their story didn't just continue. It finally felt whole. This story wasn't just about romance. It wasn't just about secrets. It was about real life, the kind of emotions many people silently live with. One of the greatest lessons here is that love must be protected, not in silence, not in fear, but with courage. When two hearts truly care, they must stand for each other, because hesitation can cost a lifetime of happiness. Communication matters. So often, relationships don't collapse because love disappears. They collapse because words were never spoken. Feelings went unexpressed. Truth remained buried. Silence replaces honesty, and misunderstanding takes control. We also see how pride destroys relationships. Pride kept Caden from fighting when he should have. Pride kept Ariella from going back when she was hurting. Pride doesn't protect, it isolates. But then comes something powerful. Forgiveness heals. Not instantly, not easily, but genuinely. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It allows a better future to exist. And finally, destiny has a way of revealing truth when hearts are ready. Life may separate people for a season, but what is meant to return often finds its way back, not unchanged, but stronger, wiser, and filled with purpose. This wasn't luck. It was growth. Growth that led to healing. Looking back at everything Caden, Ariella, and Seraphine went through, it becomes clear that this wasn't simply a story of reunion. It was a journey through pain, regret, growth, and renewal. Lives were changed. Hearts were reshaped. And love, though once shattered, refused to disappear completely. It waited patiently until they were ready to cherish it correctly. Ariella proved the strength of a mother, choosing sacrifice over comfort, protection over ease. Her decisions weren't made from bitterness, but from fear of losing innocence to a world that once harmed her. Caden proved that real strength isn't power or wealth. Real strength is accountability, standing up, admitting failure, and choosing to do better when life finally gives you another chance. And Seraphine? She became the gentle light that guided them back together. Without anger, without judgment, just love, pure and hopeful. Their story teaches us that time doesn't always destroy bonds. Sometimes it shapes them. Sometimes it teaches us what truly matters. Sometimes it prepares us to hold on to what we once lost with wiser, steadier hands. This wasn't perfection being restored. This was broken pieces carefully coming back together, forming something more meaningful than before. In the end, what truly matters isn't how perfect a love story begins. It's how courageously it survives. Caden and Ariella didn't get an easy path. They didn't get a flawless journey. They faced betrayal, fear, loneliness, separation, and heartbreak. Yet through all of that, something important remained quietly alive inside them. The capacity to love again. They didn't just come back together because destiny demanded it. They came back together because they chose growth over bitterness. They chose healing over resentment. They chose to look forward instead of being trapped in the past. And that choice created something powerful, not just reconciliation, but renewal. Seraphine will grow up not simply knowing she has parents, but knowing she has a home rooted in love, honesty, and emotional strength. A home created not by perfection, but by forgiveness and maturity. Life will always test love, but real love doesn't crumble under pressure. It learns, it heals, it returns stronger, and sometimes the most beautiful endings are born from stories that once felt hopeless, yet refused to give up on the possibility of better days. Because when hearts are willing, love always finds a way back home. Now, after witnessing everything that happened, I want to ask you something very important. Do you believe Ariella was right or wrong for keeping Seraphine a secret? Was she justified because she acted from fear, protection, and emotional pain? Or do you think Caden had a right to know from the beginning, no matter how complicated life was back then? This is one of those situations with no easy answer, and that's what makes it so real, because life isn't always simple. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. Would you have done what Ariella did? Or would you have chosen a different path? And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think, reflect, or even feel emotional at some point, please support this channel. Your engagement helps powerful stories like this reach more people. So don't forget to like this video, comment your opinion, subscribe, and stay with us for more emotional, meaningful storytelling. Because here on Billionaire Tales by Owen, we don't just tell stories. We tell experiences, emotions, and life lessons. Thank you for watching till the end. More powerful stories are coming.